at Mater Children's Hospital, and compare it to the controls. And so energy expenditure, as you get bigger, your energy expenditure is higher. So we have to adjust the energy expenditure to the body weight or fat-free mass or lean mass. So what we found was all the Prader-Willi group had lower total energy expenditure compared to the controls, and they also had a lower a resting energy expenditure to control. That's the resting energy expenditure, and then they had lower activity associated thermogenesis. So that's the energy expenditure during physical activity compared to the unaffected children, and Prader-Willi syndrome group had a lower non-exercise associated thermogenesis. So that's the energy expenditure which is not part of the exercise but fidgeting or pacing, and then they had a lower energy expenditure. So that's all despite of the growth hormone therapy. So in other words, the children with Prader-Willi syndrome had a lower total and the subgroups of energy expenditure, if you like, compared to the unaffected children. And in one study, they looked at the habitual kind of a movement, and there were about 19 adults with Prader-Willi syndrome. They were fitted with accelerometers, and then they looked at how many steps they took. I think about 16% of the 19 participants had achieved the 10,000 steps. And as you can see, 18 to 30 years, the average step a day was only 8,200, and as they get older, around 30 to 50 years, so 30 to 50 years group, not a is a prospective study, only had 5,400 and 8,100 for those older than 40. And as you can see, 2 minutes walk and 6 minutes walk testing, and the older group had was meter gained from the 2 to 6 minutes walk test. So 1999 meters for 2 minutes test and 349 meters for 6 minutes test. But those with 18 to 30 years, they had a better meter gained. And when they looked at the steps and compared to the age, and as they get older, the number of steps drop down. In a study, there's another study. They looked at the again, they fit them up with the accelerometer, and they compare the sedentary activities as well as a low impact exercise or physical activity or vigorous exercise or physical activity. And compared to obese control, the sedentary hours is about 10 hours a day, and obese control had a similar amount of hours or minutes spent in a sedentary work, and they only looked at from like morning 6 o'clock to the evenings. They looked at about out of 14 hours, about 10 hours they spent in a sedentary activity. And then when they looked at the low physical activity, the Prader-Willi syndrome group had about 30 minutes less compared to the obese control. And then when they looked at the combination of the moderate to vigorous physical activity, the Prader-Willi group had a lower time spent as well. And then another study, they looked at the heart rate recovery. So heart rate recovery is associated with the anaerobic exercise. So there were three groups in that study: the Prader-Willi syndrome group, an obese group, and lean group. And the participants wore a weighted vest, and then they did a step exercise, and And at baseline, the heart rate was very similar, about 78 beats per minute. And then they looked at how much the heart rate recovers. So in other words, the heart rate decreases when they finish exercising and resting. So at 30 seconds after physical activity, the Prader-Willi syndrome had a lower heart rate recovery. In other words, the heart rate remains high 30 minutes after the physical activity compared to the lean group. And obese control group also had a slow recovery as well compared to the lean group. But at 60 seconds, the Prader-Willi syndrome group had a low heart rate recovery. In other words, their heart rate remained high after exercise compared to both obese and a lean group. So so it's a wrong a table. So what it means is slow heart rate recovery is associated with poor cardiovascular reserve, and the slower heart rate recovery is associated with a higher risk of mortality. So if you look at the overall, the energy expenditure is low, and physical activity, spontaneous physical activity is low as well. And then there was one interesting study. It's just a case report on one patient only. It was quite an ambitious, structured exercise, and it worked in that person. So it's the total duration of 24 weeks, and that individual had a warm-up session, and then a main exercise session and the cool-down session, and they did that for 5 times a week. And they start with 5 minutes of stretching, and they break down the main exercise into 3 components. One is a preparation phase, where they did 40 to 50 minutes of treadmill and rowing exercise for 2,000 meter, and that's for 1 to 8 weeks. And from week 9 to week 16, they did treadmill and weight training, and the adaptation phase, they increased the intensity. And this person, just one person, lost weight from the pre-program weight of pre-exercise weight of 106 to 101, and then you can see the body mass index also reduced from 46 to 44, and lean body mass lean body fat reduced from 53% to 51%. But I don't know why the lean body mass reduced as well. So so that's one structured exercise just on one person. And another paper showed a report of 2 individuals, and they went through structured exercise again, and it's a total of they break it down into 3 weeks times 4, and then endurance exercise, balancing exercise, and then weight exercise, and then they build it up. And after the exercise, just 11-year-old girl had a good weight loss. So the weight loss of 3.3 kilograms, and body mass index dropped down by 2.8 points. And then you can see the bone mineralization got better as well, but it didn't work on the 14-year-old boy, and he continued to put on weight. So I'm sorry, I had a problem with the presentation, but what I wanted to include was there are a couple of studies that Urs Eichholzer did, and so he asked the children with Prader-Willi syndrome to stand on the stair and do a tiptoe exercise, and then he also recruited the siblings and friends to make it like a more fun and structured exercise. And what he found was the the calf muscle of the children with Prader-Willi syndrome get bigger, and then they were found to be more physically active after the exercise. Again, I think the structured physical activity is a fun thing to do that seemed to work. And Alzheimer's Hoser also did another study, and he had the kind of a belly exercise, jackknifing exercise, as well as balancing exercise, and that was also worked well and in a structured way. And after the physical activity, the children had a better body composition, and their physical activity get more after the physical activity. So I just want to conclude by saying there is a low tendency for low habitual physical activity and low energy expenditure, and exercise programs, actually it's more than two case reports, but I think the structured exercise is likely to be successful, and I think you have to kind of gradually build up, as in the second study, and also proven that it also improves gait, and with the growth hormone therapy, the feet get bigger and they get stronger, so that would complement well. And I think we need to do a larger studies on the structured exercise.
We might be able to take one quick question from Owen, but before we do, can I just say, you talked about calf muscles, and I'd have to mention David Robinson, who's here, our man with Prader-Willi syndrome. Dave has the best calf muscles I have ever seen in someone with PWS, because his family bushwalk a lot, Dave bushwalks a lot, and he does exercise 6 days a week, and he has beautiful calf muscles as well. Okay, we will break now till morning tea, so